I don't normally do comparisons because I like to treat every camera on its own merits. The Panasonic GH4 and Olympus EM1 are competitors, in that they're each maker's flagship cameras, but I doubt there are many photographers who would agonise over which to buy, given that one is so video capable and the other one so stills orientated. The Panasonic GX8 and Olympus Pen F, however, are viable alternatives, having the 20 megapixel sensor, almost certainly the same one, in common, and both having rangefinder rather than DSLR styling, with left offset viewfinders and a somewhat retro vibe. The Pen F having the like of retro vibe in spades, of course, whereas with the GX8 it's more a nod in that direction than a keynote. In size, the GX8 is a fair bit bigger than the Pen F, more like the M1 in fact, and whereas the Pen looks packed with controls, the GX8 looks quite sparse. Actually, they have a similar quota of physical controls. Both have dedicated exposure compensation dials, which I thoroughly approve, front and rear control dials, and the usual array of programmable function buttons, arrow pad and so on. The overall control layouts are really quite similar, both well thought out, so which you prefer is a matter of taste for the most part. There are differences though, so I'll run through what for me are the salient ones. In principle, I prefer the shutter release on a grip like the GX8. However, as with the EM1, because of the relatively petite heights of Micro Four Thirds camera bodies, the GX8 is a little stubby and my palm overflows it slightly uncomfortably. That's why I have a battery grip on my EM1. The smaller Pen F doesn't have a grip at all, but snuggles in my hands neatly and very comfortably. There's a very expensive accessory grip if you want it, but for me the Pen F's fit is just right. I also prefer the Pen's right side mounted connection slots, simply because connected cables and the articulated monitor don't inhibit one another's use. A plus point for the GX8 is an external microphone input. It's not so much a must-have for me, just that the camera at this price point should have one, and the Pen does appear to have space for it. The on-off buttons are mounted on opposite sides too, but in the Pen's case form as trump function, and the position means switching on in a separate and deliberate action, extending the pickup to fire time. The GX8 has the rotating EVF. This is one of those things that is easy to dismiss, but you find yourself using it because it's there. It's particularly useful for those low-angle shots in bright open sunlight, where the monitor is hard to see. But also many photographers find viewing at 30 or 45 degree angle much more comfortable than the traditional 90 degrees. Which brings us to the EVFs. The Pen F's is just fine, but smaller than other Micro Four Thirds cameras at this price point. The GX8 is superb, big and colourful and detailed, to the point where on any lens over about 17mm you don't need manual focusing aids like peaking and magnification. It's an integral part of the camera's usability. The GX8 rear monitor is a bit bigger, but either are big enough. A definite plus for the GX8 is the physical AF mode switch. This is a core function for me, and I also like the function switch in the centre here. I use that for the focus area set. It activates the focusing area and temporarily assigns movement of it to the arrow pad. Set it where you wish, and a touch on the shutter button resets the arrow pad to its marked ISO AF mode and so on. While the mode dial of the GX8 has room for only 3 custom modes, the Pen has 4 of them, because all of the non-core settings like art filters are consigned to the so-called creative dial on the front. It's an intelligent use of space, spoiled only by the fact that Olympus has chosen to make it a fixed asset. I'd like to have been able to assign the focus modes to that, AFS, AF consecutive and all. Then the lever could have been used to cycle between creative dial and focus mode dial, rather than its everyday function of highlight and shadow control, as curves to we Photoshop users. It does double as a selector for art mode settings, and a power zoom control if you have a power zoom lens, I should add. So this control is not a one-trick pony like the creative dial. In terms of gizmos, both cameras have focus bracketing but not stacking, They both have time-lapse and multi-exposure and high dynamic range, and in general match one another for facilities. Stuff like Olympus's in-camera perspective Keystone facility and Panasonic's eye handheld night shot balance one another out really. The GX8 will do monochrome, but the Pen F with its dedicated creative mode almost specialises in it. The Pen scores with the high res shot and composite time exposures, where you can see the image building as it goes. Panasonic counters that with a highly effective automated panorama mode. Both cameras have touchscreens with focus area positioning, but Panasonic makes better use of the screen with its menu system, which is also more logical and easily navigated. For video, both cameras have FHD good enough to satisfy the needs of everyday movie makers. The Pen F topping the GX8 with an all-intra high-quality mode and fast and slow motion options. The GX8 tops the Pen F, as you would expect from Panasonic, with its 4K mode, which spills over into stills for Panasonic's unique 4K photo mode. Its 4K pre-burst is particularly clever, giving you 30 frames from before you press the shutter to 30 frames after. Image quality of both cameras is practically the same in RAW files. At 200% I could see tiny differences in noise and colour, but no more between different shots on the same camera, so image quality forms no basis for a choice. The JPEG output from the cameras are characteristically different, the Olympus being more pleasing in general, a tad warmer. I tried out focusing on both cameras on a busy road near me, where the cars are travelling at 50 to 60 miles an hour. I used the 40 to 150 Olympus f2.8 on the Pen and the 40 to 140mm on the Panasonic, so that its depth from defocus would come into play. I shot something like 80 sequences, around 1,100 frames on each camera, with continuous autofocus, stabilisation off, 1/4000th shutter speed, and all pre or full-time focusing turned off. Thus, the camera started from scratch for each sequence. This is a fairly tough assignment because the vehicle is travelling towards the camera, but at an angle, giving the predictive focusing algorithm a bit of exercise. My sharpness criterion was simple. Judged at 100%, would I make an A4 print from this frame? Results surprised me. Of more than 1,000 shots on each camera, the Panasonic got 96% sharp, the Olympus 93%. I'd expected something in the low 80s. Next I tried single autofocus, 2 shots, one at medium distance, one near. But when I got back I didn't feel confident in the results and went back the next day. Another 200 shot pairs on each camera confirmed my results. The Panasonic Seek lock and shoot time is more convincing. Applying the same sharpness criterion as before, to one far shot, one near per vehicle, the Panasonic had an astonishing 98% success rate, the Pen 79%. In a test like this, from near to far and back, where the camera puts focus before shooting speed, the sound gives the best indication. It's convincing, but it's hardly a deal breaker. With stabilisation, I shot lots and lots of frames, taking about twice the lens focal length as my anchor point. So, at 1/60th with a 25mm lens and care, I can get all shots sharp without stabilisation. With stabilisation, I regarded any result below 9 out of 10 sharp at each shutter speed as unacceptable. In other words, I was looking for high repeatability of results. Results were 3 stops down to 1/8 for the Pen, 2 stops down to 1/15th for the GX8 body only, and 3 stops with the GX8's dual stabilisation. However, whereas I could still get a few pin sharpers out of 10 at 1/4 of a second with the Pen, at 1/4 of a second with the GX8 it was a lottery. In reality, I'd be upping the ISO rather than slowing the shutter speed beyond 15th. These tests are in no way scientific, of course, but what I can say with confidence is the cameras have similar continuous autofocus performance. The Panasonic has better single autofocus, and the Pen F has clearly the best stabilisation. Deciding which is best overall by performance or handling is actually impossible, as is deciding which is best on looks. For every person turned on by the Olympus's good looks, there will be another turned off by them. All I can do is judge by my actions. Having had both the Pen F and GX8 on my desk for a while now, when I have pictures to take, I instinctively pick up the GX8. Why? I'm not certain, but I think two reasons. That big vibrant viewfinder and the airy confidence imparted by the nimble single autofocus. But sometimes I pick up the Pen F. Why? For the peace of mind of that supreme stabilisation, the better fit in my shoulder bag and hand, and the dents machined from a block of metal feel. I don't have my Hasselblads anymore, but I have this. I'll actually be happy when I don't have both these cameras on my desk. Then I won't notice that the GX8 is rather inelegant by comparison to the Pen and gives the impression of inhabiting a lower price bracket. Or that the Pen F single autofocus isn't the best available at this price, and nor is the viewfinder. The French have a saying, you must suffer in order to be beautiful. If the Pen F were £100 cheaper than the Panasonic, I'd be tempted to suffer. But assuming the cameras are priced the same, I can sum up my thoughts in one sentence. The Pen F feels the better camera but isn't. The GX doesn't but is. Thanks for watching.